The only thing I need to take a little different approach to with what the mayor just said has to do with the fact that when I came with a couple of council people to meet with the directors of Aging Well and asked them straight up, has anybody from City Hall contacted you about your budgetary needs for the 25 fiscal year? The answer was no. No one ever contacted them. No one from finance, no one from human services, no one. And when I asked whether they were communicated with about their community development block grant money needs, and the answer was no. Nobody from the planning department doing that development of the budget or plan ever contacted them. And so that was one of the reasons where the council people got together and actually made an effort to do more. But it starts with every year when you're developing a budget to sit down or at least ask these groups that run the operation to tell us what their needs are before you can even put a dollar value on it. And so when you start by asking the question and listening to the answer, then you can assess whether you need more money or just need to move money in a different direction.
So they're more thoughtful budgeting processes.
Absolutely.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Rita Karacher. I'm with the League of Women Voters of Rhode Island slash Providence League. I'm the voter service chair for the Providence League of Women Voters. We were asked by the center to help them create a forum for questions from the audience on positions or questions that you would have for the mayor and the president of the council. But before I go there, I just wanted to tell the audience that when the league has a forum, we don't want you to, during the event, to applaud or to boo or cheer or anything like that during the event. You're only allowed to applaud at the end. So if you could just follow that and no outbursts or anything like that, because that would just interrupt the proceedings. So we just ask the audience to take that into consideration. So this evening, we're doing the Woonsocket Mayoral debate between the mayor, Mr. Christopher Beauchamp, and the town council president, Mr. Ward, Mr. John Ward.
City.
Oh, city. Town. I'm from Lincoln, I'm sorry. And our moderator tonight is Dr. Joseph Camerano from Providence College. He's a professor of political science, and he's been gracious enough to come up tonight and be our moderator. Our timekeeper tonight is Deanna McGee, and she's a league member from Bristol?
From Bristol, correct.
She's barreled all the way up from Bristol to be here tonight to be our timekeeper. So, with all due respect, I send it over to our moderator, Dr. Camerano.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the center for hosting this, and to the candidates, and to everybody who's behind me. Then I don't want to turn around so I don't turn my head on the camera. The purpose of this debate is to inform citizens who are going to make a choice very soon about these two candidates, Mayor Beauchamp and President Ward, who are both civil servants of the city for a long period of time. Our goal here is to help voters not just look backwards and assess how things have been, and you, of course, have to do that. But the more important thing is to think about the future of the city and how your choice will affect the next 4 years. And so as we go through, I've gathered questions that will help us think about Woonsocket, just not now as it is, but how it might be 4 years from now when you come back.
2 years.
2 years. Thank you. I apologize. I should have looked. I thought I should have looked.
All right.
Rhode Island has many of those, actually. So here are the rules. First of all, we're going to have opening statements by each of the candidates. And I guess I will take the prerogative of having the mayor go first, although you went first in the last debate. Is that correct?
We'll do it alphabetically.
Okay, we'll do it alphabetically.
I'm
For
used
90
to that.
seconds, the candidates get to introduce themselves and say what they think they need to say to communicate why they might be the preferred of the two candidates. And then after that 90 seconds, I will then ask a series of questions that were submitted by citizens, many of whom are here. If we have time, there'll be a quick, rapid, answer question. But what happens is with each of these questions that I ask, you will get a minute to answer, and then your opponent will get a minute to respond, and then you'll get 30 seconds as a follow-up, as well as your opponent will get 30 seconds as well. We also will have something we're calling a wild card. If, because of the artificial shortness of these answers, you need more time twice during the debate, raise your hand and you will get 30 seconds additional time for answering. And our wonderful timekeeper will be keeping not just time, but also track of wild cards. So if you do want to say more and you think it's important, raise your hand and you have 2 chances to do that. You will be warned at the 30-second mark and at the 15-second mark. And when you see the stop sign, if you don't stop, I will interrupt you. And then my last instructions to the people behind me in the audience, thank you for being here. I really do appreciate it. That's why I do these things. But if anybody starts cheering or booing or doing any kind of audible sort of response, I will probably turn around and silence you. Like I do to my students. So with that, we might as well sort of go to the opening statement. So Mayor, would you like to start?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank the Senior Center and the staff for providing this room. I also want to thank the Jacobs family for providing the video and the League of Women Voters for putting this together. I think it's important for us to have you understand where myself and John come from as far as what we believe the city can be and should be. And I'll just say this. When I became mayor on November 9th, it was because we removed the former mayor. And I was a vital part of removing the former mayor. And because of the egregious violation of the charter. And, I've been told, I've been heard that I'm part of her still. There's no shape or form of the former mayor on my campaign telling me what I'm doing or informing me. I am my own person. So I just want to make that abundantly clear, okay? And since I've been mayor since November 9th, almost 11 months, I've very much grown into the job. I love the job. I love the city. More importantly, I've learned to love the people that work at City Hall. You don't know the people at City Hall when you're a councilman because you only interact there for a few minutes. But what I found is that they're hardworking, vital staff, and to me, I think moving forward, we're going to make it even better. Thank you.
Thank you. I, too, would like to thank Aging Well and the professor and the League of Women Voters and everyone who's arranged, Paul Jacob and family coming here, and all the attendees for showing up this evening, and anybody who may be watching this later on video. We will hopefully keep this all very civil like we did our first debate. We received the compliment of the professor having done that. So how I came here, I know my family is going to say, oh, John, that story again. But here it is. It really all started back in 1986 when I tried to become a delegate to the Constitutional Convention, and that was my first foray into the political world. My children were young. I was younger. And having failed at that, I then in 1995, at 40 years old, decided to run for a school committee in the city and was elected. And so I've been serving in elective office or in other appointed positions since that time. So I am now almost 30 full years into serving in office or working in some capacity. I have worked in government at the Woonsocket Housing Authority, for the school district in Johnston as the business manager, and then the finance director in Lincoln for 16 and a half years. And so I have run a campaign based upon telling folks how experience matters. And I think what the mayor alludes to in terms of his recent experience in his 11 months in the office, I personally believe that my 30 plus years of doing what is effectively much of the same job certainly qualifies me to run for mayor and to think that I could do an effective and better job in serving as the mayor for the city of Woonsocket, and so that's why I'm here.
Great. Thank you. The first question is to Councilor Ward. And I watched your earlier debate, as I told you, and I was very impressed. It was very civil. It was also very informative. But I also got the impression that there's a lot of consensus between the two of you on a lot of issues. What I would like to ask is whether you could sort of explain to the people who are watching or here viewing, what is it about you that makes you the preferred choice for them? There's a lot of difference, a lot of similarities. So what kind of difference might actually matter when people are making their choice?
Sure. And though the mayor separates himself from the previous mayor, and that may in fact be true related to his campaign, the fact is while they were serving together, they had a very close relationship, and I was one of the people that asked to have her removed from, or had her removed from office because I was aware of the internal mechanics in City Hall that were preventing the council from doing its job. And I felt as if the mayor had not really done the citizens right in how he failed to call her out on the things she was doing. And I think the difference is the experience I have internally in management of a municipal operation is consistent with the serious problems we have in how we're managing City Hall. We both have similar feelings about some of the more social issues that we deal with, but I think the difference is, in my experience, I can bring more ability to solve problems without having to learn the job. I can walk in knowing the job.
So Mayor Beauchamp, do you have a difference that you think makes you stand apart?
I do. As John says, they continually try to patent me after the former mayor. And John knows, on day one, my door was open. I continually promoted transparency and openness. And John came into my office maybe 20, 30, 40 times until I announced that I was running for mayor in May, and then it kind of diminished. And that's the way it was 10 years prior to that. And I think if John was honest and asked himself how many times he came to City Hall on the 4th floor when the former mayor was there, it would be probably 0. My open door transparency is what I share. And I believe that I've shown that in the 11 months. And experience does matter, and I've been the mayor for 11 months.
Mr. Ward, do you have a
Sure. I can't disagree. Actually, I have to disagree. I actually was asked to come to the former mayor's office once, and I went. And we were discussing about paying off a bond issue so that we would save the interest costs, and we did. And that was all fine. And I firmly believe, as I experienced in Lincoln when I worked there, is that it was the town administrator or the mayor's job to reach out to council people because they're the people that they have to get things approved through. And so it's the mayor's job to reach out, not the council's job to reach in, because we don't know what needs to be determined and decided until the administration brings it to us. And that's how I would operate in the office.
Any response?
I disagree. It's the mayor's job and the council president to get the city business done. And by both interacting, you can achieve a lot of things. And John knows this because we did that for several months. But unfortunately, it changed when we became political allies, political opponents. That's not fair. I want to move this city forward. I know he does too, but you got to work together. And I will work with, if I'm elected, whatever city council people are elected. I promise to do that.
Okay, thank you. The next question goes to Mr. Beauchamp. I've become aware through the questions that were sent to me that there were changes in the position of Human Services Director for the city in the recent past, before you became mayor, reducing the budget and supporting only a half-time position. I did some investigating, and I couldn't quite figure out what that position is. So I'm wondering if you could sort of tell us a little bit about what that person in that position is supposed to be, and then whether it should remain part-time or go back to full-time, the way it had been in prior years.
So when I came into office, I've inherited a lot of things, and so did the city council. Whatever happened prior, we were dealt with it. And the Human Services Director was a part-time director, and the person that was doing that job told me he thought it was a part-time job. And I never got one phone call about anything related to human services, whether that was here at the senior center, veterans, elderly. He handled the job as a part-time director. And when the budget was proposed by me, the legislative body, which is the city council, could have put that to a full-time position. I heard nobody mention that. So it remained a part-time position because it was working.
So could I follow up? What is that position supposed to do?
It deals with any constituents that call City Hall, whether it's elderly affairs, veterans, homelessness, people call up, they've had a fire at their residence in the middle of the night. That's the person that goes out there along with public safety. So they continue to handle concerns by every resident in emergency basis, really.
Mr. Ward?
Sure. This is where you're going to see us differ, because when he mentions how he never got a call about Human Service Director or Human Services, this is where we differ on how things go. This Human Service Director was a part-time position principally to accommodate a retired policeman who was limited in the number of days he could work because the previous Human Service Director had resigned. And so it never should have been a part-time position. It never should be. They are responsible for the senior center, for the facility, through the board that serves in that capacity. They're the conduit for all of the people in the city that don't know exactly where to go to get services, and they become the channel by which they get directed to where they need to go, whether it's Community Care Alliance, Thunder Mist Health, a whole variety of service agencies that are in the city. And then on the other part is, without getting the phone call, in fact, the Human Service Director never even reached out to Aging Well, who operates this building and operates the senior center, to find out what their budgetary needs were, whether for the operating budget or for our community development block grant funds. So that job should have been the person to coordinating those conversations to develop a budget, and it never happened.
So do you think it's a full-time position?
Absolutely it is.
So
And it also deals with all the emergency situations he mentioned, Red Cross, emergency housing, and things of that nature.
that's very helpful. The term that we use to describe those activities is ombudsman, basically, that they're the go-between citizen and government, and they help get things linked. Do you have anything? You're not required to spend 30 seconds.
Being there for the 11 months, I believe it is now, should be a full-time position. And when the person that was doing it resigned, I hired somebody that I knew had the experience to deal with the agencies in the city of Woonsocket. I think she's doing a great job, and we've talked about making it a full-time position.
Okay, great. Anything to say in addition?
I think I raced through and covered most of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it's now Mr. Ward's turn.
Can I bank this time? No, kidding.
Go ahead.
Just kidding? No.
Okay. The third question relates to education. The future of Woonsocket, just like any other city, is tied to the quality of the public school system in the city, not just for educating children, but for attracting younger people with children, but also people without children who want to buy a house in a town with good schools, or a city with good schools. A quick look that I took at the Rhode Island Education Department report cards for the district find proficiency scores among the lowest in the state, and even lower than comparable schools. So school districts. So even among the more urban stressed, high percentage of poverty and minority students and non-native speakers, Woonsocket's at or near the bottom, both 3rd, 6th, and 11th. I guess my question is, and 1 out of 3 high school graduates from the high school actually go to any kind of college. And that's compared to sometimes 90% or more in other jurisdictions. As mayor, what initiatives would you embrace to make sure that children in Woonsocket are more ready, willing, and able to go on to higher education and more successful careers and lives?
Such a simple question. Have you got a few hours?
You may want the wild card with this one.
No, it's a complicated question only in that we need resource in an urban area, and I refer to the Rhode Island Public Expenditure Council analysis of state funding for education that clearly points out that the state is deficient in funding urban education because we have student-teacher ratios that are similar to the suburban areas. We have a different breed of student in here with different family struggles and different environmental conditions. And so it makes it more difficult, so that we should actually have smaller class sizes in them, and we should have more of the social service needs associated with those students right there available to them and their families in order to promote the education in the family. We don't have the money to do it, plain and simple, real simple. I've been fighting about education funding formula failures for years and years and years. It's falling on deaf ears. We've gone from being the 4th lowest median family income, median household income since 1990 to now being the 2nd lowest. And it's very difficult for this community to fund the schools and support the students in the way we should, because we simply don't have the taxable value and the income and the resource to do that.
Mr. Beauchamp?
Yeah, he's right. The funding formula needs to be revised, right? And I know we've been talking about this for years and years, and it's true. But in my time as mayor, I've built relationships, and I've had relationships with the State House, the governor, Senator Rhode, Senator Whitehouse, to ask them and to talk to them about how we can do better. And one of the things we did do this year, with the governor's help, was get to attendance matters. When we went to the high school and we told the kids and the students, the teachers, how important attendance is. A simple thing like, if you're attending a school, you're going to be there to learn. But if you're not there, it's going to be difficult. So simple steps like that will help. And the attendance has gone up, I believe, to 15 to 20% from where it was before, just by educating, talking to the students, and telling them why attendance is important.
All very good and correct. However, much of that was done with ESSER money and hiring more counselors and more guidance, people who are out there working with students and encouraging them, doing the kinds of things that we're not going to be able to do now because several of those positions had to have been cut in the next budget, and the budgets after will be even worse. So that all of those support systems that came because of the misfortune of COVID will now disappear, or many of them will, unless they can reorganize their department and their operation. So the challenge is coming back, and I'm not saying everything isn't helpful. I'm saying I'm not sure where we go if we don't provide those support services that are critical to their success.
I agree. In talking to the school department, which was very remiss with the former administration, I've opened my door. The school committee, superintendent, I've been in my office multiple times, and that was never the case before. So having that dialogue, creating relationships, which I'll say many, many times over tonight, is valuable and very important.
I'm going to take the prerogative of asking like a lightning round follow-up on this. When I was looking at the data, I also noticed that even though more than about half or more of the students are non-Caucasian, non-white students, often many of them English as second language or they're English language learners, and yet the teachers are almost exclusively Caucasian. Do you think that matters? And if so, what would you do about it?
That to me.
Yeah, and then you get to...
It matters greatly.
You get to answer, too.
It actually matters greatly, and it's a matter of recruitment and education coming out of Rhode Island College and URI to get teachers who are prepared to walk into urban environments. But the struggle is that, again, I hate to go back to finance all the time, but it's essential. With the kind of funding we have available, we can't be competitive. For instance, when I did an analysis of all the Masters plus 30 levels around the state a few years ago, we were second to the bottom, where the town of Lincoln was second to the top. And for us to compete with those communities for teachers with the salary levels we can afford to pay, we should be paying people bonuses to come here to work in these urban environments and have the skills they need, and promote them through whether it's some kind of grant in their tuition to get them into this community to teach.
Yes, it definitely does matter. It matters in the police department, it matters in the fire department, it matters in our schools, right? You want people looking like the students. You want teachers looking like the students because they're from that culture. And I think it's important. We have an education center on Main Street that was recently opened in the last 2 or 3 years. Vital that we utilize that to have classes for English first learners and have classes there so people know there are resources in this city that will not cost them any money to go there and get the workforce development that they need. And I think that's vital.
All right. One more quick follow-up about this, and we'll start the same way.
30 seconds or a minute.
Oh, okay. You want to continue? Thank you.
Just to add to what Chris just said, and what I was thinking, and I think will probably come up later as we talk about areas of Woonsocket and how it is evolving. I think if we go back a century, we could have the same discussion dealing with the French population, the French-Canadian population. Today we're dealing with the Hispanic population, the Latino population. And it's simply that we are evolving. And we have to embrace that, we have to make it work, and we have to find ways to open channels of communication with all of the cultures so that we can have a city that thrives and survives and thrives, just like it did in transitioning from the French-Canadian battles with the English-speaking to the 21st century where it's Spanish-speaking and English-speaking. And we need to adapt quickly.
I would just add that, I was a volunteer freshman coach for 12 years at the high school. And I learned valuable lessons from them, and I hope I imparted some valuable lessons to them too. And I think that's a two-way street because when you see how some of these kids that come to school, they haven't had a meal. So it's hard to learn when your stomach is empty, right? So there are things we can do, simple things like that I think will benefit our students in the future.
Thank you. I think I'm going to move on, and if we have time, I'll come back to my speculation idea. The fourth question is to the mayor, and is continuing on sort of issues of children and quality of life. What's your assessment of the plans for the new athletic complex and the new elementary school at Berryfield?
I think they're both great assets to the city of Woonsocket. The athletic complex, which, in my field of construction for 43 years, I think I lend great value to being the mayor and giving my expertise on construction projects. We had the pre-construction meeting today. School department was there, superintendent. It's very exciting because I think we were the only high school in the state that didn't have their athletic facilities adjacent to their high school. And for years it worked, but you know what? As John said, we have to amend, we have to adapt, we have to do different things. Now having our athletic complex next to our high school, I think gets attendance better. I think the graduation rate will be better because kids will want to be a student athlete and come to the school because of that athletic complex. It's going to be a $6 to $7 million investment, and I think it's well worth it.
I think we are very fortunate. Unfortunately, it's tragedy that brought us here to get the money to be able to do this. It was promised to be something else, but let's forget that for now and talk about the fact that we're going to get it done. We're using federal funds. We're not going to have a bond issue burdening the taxpayers in this city locally. I can't speak for the federal government, but in any case, that field at Cass Park is essential. I talked about wanting that since 2013. It's come to life. And I think it's going to be creating a sense of pride in the student population that that's right next to their school, and it may actually encourage attendance and encourage participation in athletics by having it right there. As to the elementary school, I think the important thing and critically important thing about that school and its design and consolidating a few schools together has to do with efficiencies in providing some of the more challenging services by having teachers who would otherwise have to move from place to place be in one place with the students that they serve. And by its size, it will be more educationally efficient in communicating with those students and assisting them.
Have anything to...
Yeah, I'd just like to add the new elementary school is, what we need. When we were all going to school, John and I, there were neighborhood schools everywhere, and they worked well for a while. But they're not handicap accessible. They need a lot of money to update them. And I know some people still like the neighborhood school way of thinking, but I think this new elementary school, again, is going to encourage kids to learn. You want to be in a new environment, a new school. I think that's critical.
Again, I can't speak highly enough of the design team that's putting it together and the plan to provide a more efficient level of service to the needier groups in the population of students that will attend. Many of the kids with IEPs and handicapping issues will be attending this school. And as I said, they'll be able to get a service in a larger group and have more efficiency in the staffing, which is a great thing. And they, I think it's not often that we have an opportunity to give our students a brand new building that's in good shape and will allow them to be proud of what they're doing in a school. So I'm looking forward to it.
Great, thank you. Next question is Beauchamp, right? I think I almost forgot which one goes. Okay. The next question is regarding to some budgetary questions. And someone wrote and asked about this very unique relationship that the city has to this very center where we are. That most municipalities have their own government-funded and run center. And this is kind of a unique configuration, not just in this area, but nationwide. There aren't all that many structures like that. But it raises some questions about budgetary support. And so I'm kind of curious, since this is one of the main places to do programming for seniors, are we currently providing enough funding, and should we make a full commitment by putting a specific line in for senior citizen support?
Well, I think we can always give more money to our seniors, our veterans. There are a lot of places if we had it. The city owns this building, so it's a city building. We do all the maintenance, the roofs, and whatever else. And then we provide money to Aging Well to do their programs. I was here the other day for the exercise program, and I'm telling you, I'm still hurting from 70-year-old people that made me look shameful. But it was great to see that. But I've taught other senior centers throughout the state, a couple of them, and one in Lincoln in particular, where they got a lot of green space, right? We get a lot of asphalt around this senior center. And at some point in the future, I'd like to see a new senior center, whether it's here or somewhere in Woonsocket where you can have some green space so people can get out, get fresh air, walk around. And I know a lot of people are accustomed to what they have here, but again, change is not a bad thing. We have some old, antiquated buildings, and this is one of them.
Okay, it is a unique relationship we have with this senior center, and when I worked in Lincoln, one of the things was they had a very old senior center, and people in Lincoln went to Cumberland or they went to Smithfield. Smithfield had a very nice new senior center, and then Lincoln built a new senior center, and people came back and go to the Lincoln Senior Center, and people from Woonsocket became a member of the senior center there. So many of our people here in Woonsocket go to Lincoln. This place is a nice building. It's a functional building. There's a lot of people that come here that like it. It needs to be invested in. And I pointed out a couple of years ago during the budget deliberations that I did an evaluation of budgets around Northern Rhode Island for senior services and senior centers. And we are unique, and we are nowhere near funding the way they do in other communities. We do it with a contract with Aging Well. That's a longer story that I'll cover in the 30 seconds. But and the reason why it came about that way. But yes, we need to invest in our seniors. We need to invest in the center to bring people who would go out of town back into this senior center.
I agree. And again, building relationships, talking to people at our city delegation, our state delegation. I plan to have quarterly meetings. That hasn't happened with our city leaders, with our state delegation and our federal delegation. I think it's important because they know Woonsocket is a community that's not a rich community as far as wanting to spend money left and right. We don't have casino money like Lincoln may have, right? So we got to find out other ways to get money. We don't have the settlement money from Google, those type of things. So we got to do with what we have. We pivot very often, and unfortunately, some of the pivots are hard, but that's what we have to do. So, thank you.
The mayor is right in that regard. Some of the pivots are difficult because most all of them involve finance, which we have a very limited pool of every year. However, we do have community development block grant money that goes, fortunately, to pay for fire trucks, but it doesn't really put enough into a senior center. And the reason the senior center has the situation it's in is because I believe when it was first set up this way, it was run by Senior Services, Inc., which was actually producing the meals for a variety of areas around us. And that doesn't happen anymore, I understand. And so that relationship, I think, could change. But at the same time, like with North Providence, where the Mancini Center was being run by a nonprofit, we're being run by a nonprofit. The mayor took it back, and it was not exactly a warm, loving relationship they had when they did that. I would not want to interrupt or cause a problem for the seniors getting into some sort of turf battle over who's going to run the senior center. So it would be more a conversational thing to find out how it's best done.
You get a hold of it now. If you need it.
Since I've been mayor, I've been here several times, and I see the activity and the love that people have when they come here. Just want to make it a little bit more warm and fuzzy place. And of course, that needs money, right? But we're going to do the best we can, and I believe that we can find more money to help this senior center continue to be what it is, and hopefully in the future, something more down the road.
You both kind of hinted that you might find money. Any ideas other than what you've already mentioned as to where you might look?
Me or him?
Both. We'll start with you since this is your question.
We haven't practiced harmonizing yet, so you go first.
So again, when I looked at the budget this year, I mean, I've been there 11 months. I see things that I think are a little wasteful, right? But they're not big ticket or big dollar items. And so I just kind of evaluated for the first 11 months here. But there are things that I think we can do better. We can save some money and put those funds to something that I think you get more bang for the buck for. And that's what I'll look at. And again, the governor and I, even though some people may not like the governor, I have an open door conversation with him 2-3 times a week. And to me, that's important.
So answers that you gave her, shift maybe some things in the budget and go back to the state and try to get some additional funds.
Correct.
Ideas?
No, the only thing I need to take a little different approach to with what the mayor just said has to do with the fact that when I came with a couple of council people to meet with the directors of Aging Well and asked them straight up, has anybody from City Hall contacted you about your budgetary needs for the 25 fiscal year? The answer was no. No one ever contacted them. No one from finance, no one from human services, no one. And when I asked whether they were communicated with about their community development block grant money needs, and the answer was no. Nobody from the planning department doing that development of the budget or plan ever contacted them. And so that was one of the reasons where the council people got together and actually made an effort to do more. But it starts with every year when you're developing a budget to sit down or at least ask these groups that run the operation to tell us what their needs are before you can even put a dollar value on it. And so when you start by asking the question and listening to the answer, then you can assess whether you need more money or just need to move money in a different direction.
So they're more thoughtful budgeting processes.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. We're going to go on to the next question. And the question comes from the citizen who asked about bicycles and pedestrian traffic. And as a user of bike paths, I am deeply appreciative of the Blackstone bike path and have been to Woonsocket many times because of it. And a lot of communities throughout Rhode Island, around the country, have taken advantage of rails to trail movement that have created these bike paths and made pedestrian and bicycle traffic through the main commercial districts much safer, much more pleasant, and much more conducive to people stopping for something to eat or to drink and then wandering around for a while. I'm kind of curious as to what you think your view is on how well the city has leveraged that asset and what they might do better in the future.
Pardon my surprise, but I'd say what asset? You have been into Woonsocket on a bike path. You have never been through Woonsocket on a bike path.
I have, yes. Actually,
Well,
you've
you've
made
hit
my way
some-
up to Worcester.
You've hit some shared lanes on main roads, but the bike path itself was intended to go in a completely different path. It's
Correct.
not complete. Woonsocket's one of those few places that it's not complete. And they do have a plan as an alternative that would actually put it out onto Clinton Street and Cumberland Street and come closer to the areas for recreation and for dining that you would hope to have them bring the bicycle traffic. But that has not been finalized and done yet. So I would hope to work with the state to try to persuade them to move us up on the priority list so that we could have a conversation among city residents about alternative plans to complete the bike path all the way into Massachusetts without having it painted lines on Hamlet Avenue and over the Brennan Street Bridge, and rather do what they talk about by actually incorporating it into more of the commercial zones in our city.
Great.
I'm encouraged by the amount of people that do ride bikes. Unfortunately, you can't change people's habits. And there are people that ride these bikes and the motorized bikes, and they go to places where they shouldn't be, right? But I am for bike paths and bike lanes. I did call the DOT. They did tell me they were going to try to push it up to 26, but this has been postponed since, I think, 2016, or maybe even before that. So, they continue to say, we're gonna do it, create that piece that's missing in Woonsocket. We just did the Greenway project that's about 80% complete, the old bypass. The bike path goes adjacent to that. I think that's going to be an attractive addition to the bike path, and I think we need to contact the DOT and stay vigilant to get that other piece built.
I agree on the bicycles. We have a culture shift here that we have to adapt to. More and more people are using bikes, especially e-bikes, because they're a viable means of transportation for short distances, people going to work and recreating. And that's why I think it's important that, by the way, the meeting with DOT, I sat in one with my wife in the library back in 2013, and they promised they'd be talking about starting it next year. And it's not here. The fact is, we need to work with the state to make it a priority, because with the higher number of e-bikes and scooters and things, people using alternative means of transportation, we need to give them a more dedicated pathway through the city that is a safer way than putting them in the middle of traffic or having them do the wrong thing and be on the sidewalk and put pedestrians in danger. And we need to adapt, like cultural adaptation, we need to make physical adaptation to take care of that problem and do it in collaboration with the state.
Anything to add there?
I'm good.
So I'm going to follow up on this too. A number of communities in Rhode Island and nationally have joined movements. These are nonprofits that encourage advanced planning for when the funding actually comes. Is Woonsocket involved with sort of safe streets or walkable streets? There are a number of these organizations that help you to plan ahead of time so that you can vision what you can do with it. Have you done anything like that here?
There have been some contracts and some grants that we've got for safe streets where we've done ADA compliance things, crosswalks, stamped concrete crosswalks, so they're much more visible. So yes, the safe routes things we have tackled. There is more money, I'm told, federal money to tackle this. We need the DOT to come down to Woonsocket more often and to look at what we have and to see the gaps that we're missing, because I think that's imperative.
You know, you both have raised this issue about you kind of being left out because we're in the northeast corner of the state and far away, technically for Rhode Island miles, from the capital. I'm going to give you each an opportunity to sort of expand on that challenge and how you might address it. And I guess...
I thought you were going to say vent. I don't want to vent. I could, but that would take 2 hours. It is a problem for us because ever since, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but I say it over and over, ever since a fellow that ran Lincoln Downs moved Route 295 south instead of coming through the edge of Woonsocket as it was originally planned, we were effectively economically isolated from the rest of the state with no major roads or highways coming through like every other urban area has in the state. We're alone. We're an island. Economically, we're an island. And so it becomes difficult, even though we have CVS and they're wonderful people. They have Route 99 that goes into the industrial park. But it does create a challenge for us as being outliers that are isolated from the state in that regard for transportation. And so it makes other cities more attractive that are more connected to the national transportation systems.
I take a different approach. I think we're in a good position geographically between Worcester, Providence, Boston. In the 11 months that I've been mayor, there have been many developers that have come here and contractors that have that same thought. And to me, we need to promote that. And they come and look at our buildings, our old mills, some of the architecture we have here on Main Street. And I've never seen that activity in the 12 years that I was on the city council from 2007 to 18, 11 years, have that much interest here. So as the mayor, my job is to promote Woonsocket the best I can, and that is calling people, building the relationships, and telling the out-of-state people that do come here, we got stuff to offer. And I think when you do that, they figure that out and they see it. And I think that's something that's been lacking. I don't think that, I don't look at Woonsocket as a negative. I look at it as a positive. And we're at the northern end of the state, but so what? You can go from Westerly to Woonsocket in an hour.
Thank you. The next question
Could
comes
we do
from
two-
I figured I gave you the extra opportunity. Do you want to say something? Go ahead.
I was simply going to say I don't disagree necessarily with the mayor saying, but the interest in our commercial buildings and our former industrial buildings in this industrial giant we used to call Woonsocket are in turning it into residential units. And for the fact is that we are, because of our being away from much of the transportation systems, the larger transportation systems, and the rail systems, we are turning into an urban residential community, which is an unusual combination, frankly. And yet we have an infrastructure system that's an urban type of system, and it requires a lot of overhead and cost.
Mr. Bishop, do you have anything else you want to add?
I know that when these people do come here, and some of them will come 3, 4, 5 times, and listen, by getting people interested in our buildings, in our old buildings that we thought were never going to move, we finally have movement on the old middle school, and that could be a $30, $40 million project, and it's going to move forward. And for that, development like that brings in much more tax revenue, and that's how you move Woonsocket forward, getting more tax revenue here. We're never going to have the retail that we once had, right? You can call Amazon, the things at your door in 20 minutes. But getting people to invest, housing is critical, and we'll probably talk about housing a little bit later.
Maybe. Okay, this next question, I'm just going to do the 1 minute each, and if you really need something, I'll give it to you after that. Somebody has asked a question about climate change, and we don't generally think about Woonsocket as being subject to the effects of climate change, but I'm wondering, what kind of impact do you see in the short, medium, long term related to climate, and how should the city prepare? And I believe Mr. Ward goes first.
Okay. Well, we are fortunate, actually, that we suffered the disaster in 1955 that led to a flood control program. I'm sure Cumberland doesn't agree that that's a fortunate thing for them, because we're able to have our levees contain most of the water, and because of the extreme rainfall events that have been happening most recently, it does put our river, our Blackstone River, into a dangerous situation, but most of it in the city of Woonsocket is contained within the levees that take it downstream and inflict it on Cumberland and such.
I lived on that river for a while.
And so it's a good thing for Woonsocket. But the fact is, there's other ways that we need to look at how we can have an impact, both to our benefit and to the benefit of what you may consider climate change. And one of the things that's troubled me is with all of our LED conversion and the promise of solar, and the fact that the former mayor made an announcement back in 2017 about big plans for solar canopies and solar projects. It never happened. But I think we need to work with whatever state agency, whether the infrastructure bank or whoever, can provide us some low-cost financing or some systems to help pay for a system of putting in some solar canopies above parking lots while we're fixing the parking lots, and putting as many solar panels on buildings as we can possibly do to create energy efficiency internally and save money for at least 20, 25 years and put us less dependent on fossil fuels. And despite any of the rhetoric out there about whether it's real, it's something and it can work to our benefit.
Okay, Mr. Beauchamp.
Climate change is real. I mean, you ask the poor people in Florida, right? They've been hit with those hurricanes back to back. I mean, we're lucky here in the Northeast that we don't get that kind of drastic weather, although we did back in the 30s and 50s, we got hurricanes. It's not the norm. But you got to recognize that, our levees and our river, the Blackstone River, if we did get some catastrophic hurricane that came here, we got to be prepared. So we got to make sure our levees, the Army Corps of Engineers, our dams are maintained, prepared for in case something happens. So we got to make sure we stay in contact with those agencies to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to as a city, to make sure we have everything updated the way it should be. And you only think about catastrophes when they happen. We should be prepared for them in case they do happen.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question in the interest of time. Most of the questions I've been asking are all about fiscal priorities of the city. And the current proposal, the budget, has a 4% tax increase for property taxes, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. Clearly, the funding isn't there to do everything. What are your two most important priorities? And you don't have to stay on the questions that were asked, but it would be nice if you were able to rank order among the things we've talked about, which are most important and second most important.
So, yeah, we did have a 4% tax increase. Excuse me. And, as the mayor putting my budget together, it was difficult. It was very difficult to talk to directors, talk to the staff and say, what can you do with and what can you do without? And, when you have that honest dialogue as opposed to the I'm telling you what you're going to do, you get things solved. I inherited, as the council, we inherited a lot of things that were from the previous administration. We have lawsuits that we still got to settle. And we've settled some of them. And that's why we had a 4% tax increase. It could have been a lot worse if we didn't tighten our belts, do some things that we've done. And of course, the ARPA money is part of that, right? But that goes away. So it's going to be tough to say that we won't have a tax increase, but by getting more development here, we talked about the plazas at Walnut Hill, and we just had a meeting. If one of those plazas gets redeveloped, $500,000 is 1% of that 4% tax increase. That's new tax revenue coming in. Thank you.
Probably only in a couple of years, not next year. And the fact is, our priority next year is the fact that we have used $1.4 million of ARPA funds We have had to settle what's approximately $10 million of commercial property lawsuits over values. And if those values are now reset down to what they settled with, that's going to impact our future years, and it's going to impact our residential taxpayers. So our first priority has to be the taxpayers in this case, because they got hit with 4%, and we need to find a way to make sure that they don't get whacked again. And it's going to be extremely difficult cutting $1.4 million of revenue away and trying to come up with an alternative way to fund the programs we have in place now and do the things we plan to do. So that's a huge challenge. And so the priority, I think, in our minds has to be, how do we protect the taxpayers from the corrections caused by all of the disasters that were handed over to us?
So I'm going to try to pin the two of you down on this. In the 30 seconds that you have, what is the number one and number two thing that you will protect from budget reductions in a period of fiscal stress? What won't you touch?
I won't touch public safety, because public safety is paramount to all of us. And, we had settled all the contracts last year when I was the mayor, and we did give people raises. And public safety is paramount. And of course, the taxpayers. I mean, I did not want to have a 4% tax increase, but we had to. So we got to generate more revenue. How do you do that? Again, look at these people that are coming in to buy buildings that their value is very low, and if they rehab them and create more space and more people in these buildings, the values are going up. So creating higher values will get us more revenue.
Can't disagree with the public safety first. We have to keep people safe. We have to be here in case of an emergency medically. We have to be able to protect people in our parks, on our streets. And yeah, that's got to be the first priority. The second priority is a hard one to disagree with about the taxpayers. I said it just in the first answer, is the taxpayers have to be a priority. But in terms of the spending side of the budget, I would have to say that Public Works and finishing the projects that we're working on with the ARPA funds in this next cycle has to be the second highest priority, because we need to spend that money properly before the end of next year in order to not lose it and get the job done.
Great, thank you. We've run out of time for questions, and now you each get 60 seconds in order to sort of make your final statement and pitch. So, Council President Ward, you go first.
So this is our closing.
This is your closing.
Okay, just wanted to be sure. I finally prepared something.
Okay.
Instead of just
All right,
ad-lib.
60 seconds.
So I began my campaign with the motto, "Experience matters." And I've pointed out throughout my campaign, I have experience designed to get the job done, and done demanding of myself and all city employees the highest level of integrity, applying sound judgment to all our efforts. My opponent speaks of his 11 months of experience. Well, I have 30 years of experience doing all the things a mayor is responsible to do. So yes, experience matters, and I'm here to offer my experience to the citizens of Woonsocket. Experience matters not because it's not just that you have experience, it's about the experience you have. Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Mayor Beauchamp, yours.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody being here. Experience, that word's thrown around a lot. But my experience sitting as the acting mayor for the last 11 months is critical to be moving forward. And I said this many times. As a council person for 11 years, and then the council president last year, I thought I knew what a mayor did, had no idea till you sit in those shoes. And we hear that bantered around, right? You don't know until you step in somebody's shoes. And it was crystal clear to me that the mayor of the city of Woonsocket does a million things. And unfortunately, you get pulled in many directions. I don't have a chief of staff. I don't have certain things that other cities and towns have. And I think we got to look at that, because you can only be in one place at one time, and there are critical things that you have to look at. But other people want to be part of you also. So I've learned that you got to try to adapt. You got to try to get whatever sleep you can when you can, because it's a hard job. I love it. I enjoyed it, and I hope to be here for the next 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That we've reached the end. I'd like to thank the two candidates for their thoughtful and clear responses and for tolerating my lack of depth of knowledge of Woonsocket. And I want to express my appreciation to the audience, both here and online, particularly those who submitted questions, which allowed me to kind of focus on things that really matter on a day-to-day basis in Woonsocket. So you are now permitted to give a round of applause to both candidates, and thank you. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.